Abortion. It's one of the most heated debates in the world. But what if I told you there's a way to cut through all that noise? A way to step into the debate armed not with opinions, but with data. Hard, undeniable data that can change the way that we think about abortions, not just as a moral or personal issue, but as something that can affect society. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll have something no one else brings to this debate. In the 1990s, crime in America dropped like it never had before. 30% gone in a decade. Everyone had their theories: more cops, tougher laws, less cocaine, but two economists proposed a pretty crazy idea. What if the key to the crime drop wasn't what happened in the 90s, but what happened in the 70s? Their theory? Legalized abortion. Now this made everyone mad. Pro-lifers were furious, pro-choicers were enraged. What followed was a firestorm, scientific breakthroughs, accusations of eugenics, and a moral debate that is far from over. Now here's the big question. Could one of the most controversial policies in history secretly hold the power to reshaping society? You'll learn about the relationship between abortion and crime, why it made everyone mad, and what it means for us today. I'm Harris, and I'm going to simplify the psychology of legalized abortions.
Good morning. We're coming on the air with breaking news from the Supreme Court at this hour. The justices handing down the highly anticipated ruling on abortion.
The Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, ending abortion as a constitutional right after nearly a half century.
This time on a 5-4 vote, taking away what was regarded as a fundamental right. Right now, new laws banning abortion are taking effect in several states. Just hours after the court overturned the landmark Roe versus Wade decision, leaving it to states to decide whether abortion is legal.
In 2022, the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. It was a ruling against a woman's constitutional right to an abortion. This decision turned the clock back 50 years to pre-1973, when abortion was legalized nationwide. The Supreme Court's decision reinvigorated the abortion debate between the right and the left. If liberals and conservatives had this debate before 1970, then there wouldn't be that much data that they could source because, well, it was illegal and no one was going to tell themselves. After 50 years of legalized abortions, researchers are drowning in data. Seriously, there's so much that we can look at the effect of abortion on happiness, stress, women in the workplace, economic growth, birth rate, and so much more. And that's exactly what two economists did. When crime fell in the US by over 30% in the 90s, it was so crazy that no one could figure out what was going on, because we hadn't seen numbers like this since Prohibition. Steve Levitt, one of the economists, wrote a paper discussing the potential factors that could impact the reduction in crime in the 90s. The three main factors were more police, more criminals in prison, and less cocaine on the streets. Now, Bill Clinton took a lot of credit for this reduction in crime, saying that his Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 was the reason for this massive drop in crime. But according to Levitt's data, these three factors explained less than 50% of the massive drop in crime. What if something that happened nearly 20 years ago was the reason for the staggering drop in crime in the 90s? Levitt and another economist, John Donohue, had a hunch that legalized abortions in the 70s could be another potential factor, because of what Donohue called unwantedness. I don't like the word unwantedness. It's a disgustingly simplistic term that describes a multitude of reasons that can impact a woman's decision to get an abortion. But in science, sometimes you just have to simplify things and condense things down. So that's what they did. In any case, women most likely to have unwanted pregnancies are usually poor, less educated, younger, and minorities. And children of parents who aren't ready for them tend to do worse in school and have more behavioral and health problems. Now, these women often have less support, limited resources, and more dysfunction in their lives, which is already quite stressful. Now, compound that with additional stress and complications from having a child, especially if you're not ready for one. A stressful and dysfunctional environment with limited resources isn't ideal for anyone. Now, it can lead to worse parenting practices like authoritarian parenting styles, less time spent with their child because they need to work, poor diets, and children being exposed to dysfunctional and stressful situations. And all of these factors can impact a child's development. In the 1970s, when abortion was only legal in a few states like New York and California, younger and married and inner-city minority women were more likely to have unwanted pregnancies. But women from middle and upper-class households were getting most of the abortions. See, here's the thing. Pre-1973, most women would need to travel to get an abortion, and women from middle and upper class households had the resources to travel. But after Roe v. Wade, it was poor, young, unmarried, and inner-city minority women who were most likely to get abortions because travel and therefore time and money were no longer barriers. At its peak, the US had 1.5 million abortions every year, compared to 4 million live births. Now, to put that scale of this magnitude into perspective, imagine having a school where for every 30 students who are expected to show up, 8 never do because they're never born. What happens when you take the magnitude of abortions and fuse it, using math and stats magic, with the unwantedness effect? It leads you down this logical path. Unwanted children are more likely to engage in crime when they grow up, but an unwanted child who's never born will never engage in crime. Now, what happens when you combine the effects of unwanted children never being born with crime in, say, 15 to 20 years? If unwantedness leads to higher crime and legalizing abortions creates less unwantedness, then abortions lead to less crime in 15 to 20 years. Now that we have our hypothesis, let's find out what actually happened. Collecting the evidence for this is tricky. You can't just do a randomized control experiment where a coin flip dictates who does and who does not get an abortion. That would be unethical at best and ironically criminal at worst. What you would need to do is collect evidence another way. See, abortion rates vary considerably from state to state. This means that you can't just select a group of random states and measure their differences, nor can you get the average from states because of the massive variety in abortion rates. Instead, Levitt and Donohue divided all states into 3 equal-sized groups: states with high abortion rates, states with medium abortion rates, and states with low abortion rates. Then they compared what happened to someone born in 1972 before legalized abortion to someone born in 1974 after legalized abortions. And those born in 1974 were much less likely to commit crime than those born in 1972. What's more, the states with higher abortion rates saw a larger drop in crime compared to states with lower abortion rates. In fact, there was a 30% difference in crime rate between high abortion states and low abortion states by 1997. A 30% difference is insane. But it didn't end there. Levitt and Donohue published these mind-blowing findings in a 2001 paper titled The Impact of Legalized Abortion on Crime, and concluded this paper with an even crazier prediction. They said, 20 years from now, abortion will be the single greatest cause for the reduction in crime. In 2019, Levitt and Donohue published a follow-up paper to share if their prediction came true. But before we get to that, and I promise we will, we have to talk about the controversy and the media storm that arose as a result of the 2001 paper. This is where things get fascinating and spicy, but before we dive deeper, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Do these connections make sense to you? How do you feel about these findings so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like unpacking deep topics like these, like, share, and subscribe. And turn on those notifications too. Now trust me, this next part is going to blow your mind. After the 2001 paper was released, the media coverage took a life of its own. It ignited hate from both sides of the political sphere. For instance, people on the right were mad because it showed that abortion kinda helped society. But at the same time, people on the left were also mad. The conversation in the media quickly became about race, insinuating that Levitt and Donohue were blaming racial minorities for the crime. Some even suggested the research was an endorsement for race-based fertility control, similar to eugenics. But the thing is, a couple of researchers just wanted to find out how a policy change was affecting crime. It was honestly as simple as that. Unfortunately, that meant highlighting the fact that a certain cohort of individuals, usually because of the circumstances they're born into, are more likely to have unwanted children, who are then more likely to commit crimes when they grow up. But most people only focused on this part and ignored the other half of the story. When given the opportunity and the choice, women are pretty good at deciding when to bring a child into a safe, loving, and nurturing environment. But if a woman knows that she can't provide a good environment for her child when given the choice, she won't have the baby. The mechanism between abortion and less crime is actually pretty simple. Women making good choices. But before they could clear the air about this controversy, another economist found a mathematical error in their findings that could discredit their results. And the media had fun with this one, with headlines like Socioeconomics. Levitt and Donohue, in a panic, drove back into the research to fix their mistake. Now, something did change after fixing their mistake. The original findings were now stronger than ever. That's right. The only way that they were wrong before was they underestimated the effect of abortion on crime. Now, again, this didn't make anyone happy, and when you think about it, it does make sense. On the right, it's like, hey, stop giving people more reasons to get abortions. And on the left, it's like, hey, this very important private matter of yours kind of helps society because someone like you and someone in your situation might raise a criminal. With the grossness and discomfort of framing the argument of abortions in this way, even though it's a sound argument with logical cause and effect mechanism, it's no wonder that people started to look for alternative theories. A 2009 study by Jessica Reyes described how removing lead was another important factor that could explain why crime was falling. Why did lead reduce crime? See, lead is a neurotoxin, essentially a poison for the brain. It's associated with reduced IQ and more behavioral problems in children. Long story short, exposure to lead in childhood leads to more criminal behavior as an adult. Lead was taken out of gasoline and paint between 1975 and 1985, just around the time abortion was legalized. Now, Reyes' paper exposed how the removal of lead was linked with the reduction of crime in the 90s. So, what did this mean for abortion and crime? Were Levitt and Donohue's findings discredited? Actually not. In fact, Reyes' paper revalidated the cause and effect relationship between abortion and crime, because Reed showed that reductions in crime by lead was not affected when accounting for abortion. Now, this means that two effects of lead and of abortions were independent of each other and could exist side by side. Now, this is pretty common in scientific inquiry, where no cause happens because of a single factor. There are usually a number of different factors, and this is why probabilities come into play, adding higher probabilities to certain effects than others. But in any case, it was clear that abortion reduced crime. But there's still one thing left to find out. Was there any truth to Levitt and Donohue's prediction that in 20 years, abortion would be the single greatest cause for the reduction in crime? Levitt and Donohue published a paper in 2019 to revisit these initial predictions. Their 2001 paper initially predicted that legalized abortions would account for 50% of the reduction in crime. Remember, to measure the change in abortion, Levitt and Donohue divided states based on their abortion rates. They had 3 equal-sized groups, high, medium, and low abortion rate states. They looked at and compared crime rates in each group over a 30-year period. What did they find? Crime in states with high abortion rates dropped by 60% more than states with low abortion rates. Now, this means that, and I still can't believe it even though it's true, that the cumulative effect of legalized abortion explains around 80% of the reduction in crime. 80%? That's insane. Now, there's several ways to look at this. If you're having an abortion debate and you're on the right, your moral imperative is on the fetus's right to life. And in this case, this argument probably won't change your mind. But I've always been confused by something. See, the right's focus is on every potential person's right to life. But it's really about the right to a decent life, or even a good life. So, sure, the right can keep its right to life argument, but ironically, the group that's always talking about crime never talks about the biggest factor that can help reduce crime. Apart from abortions, it's the right to the resources to provide a decent life. If unwantedness leads to more crime, then providing women with the resources to provide their babies with a decent life should reduce unwantedness. Then women are more likely to want to have their babies, and that will likely reduce abortions and crime. As for the left, well, it's clear that when given the opportunity and the choice, women know if they're capable of bringing a child into the world. So a right to choose becomes your moral imperative, and you should fight for that right. But you should also argue equally as hard for the right to a decent life. I bet that there's a lot of women out there who would want to have a baby but decide against it because, for a variety of reasons, they can't provide a decent life for it. While women should always have this choice should be less to do with their ability to provide a decent life for the child. See, of all the things women have to worry about, a decent life for a child that they could have should not be one of them. The data shows that two things can be true at the same time. Having an abortion is a very personal matter that can, at the same time, have a large impact on society. Now, I think there's one way that you can look at abortion and crime that the right and left can agree on. The unwantedness effect is a huge driving force behind most abortions. And there's a lot that goes into unwantedness, as we've discussed. In that case, what can be done so that mothers want their babies? What changes can be made so that more children are wanted, loved, and supported, and less are aborted? Now, there's another thing that affects abortion, and that's young people. Now, if you want to learn why more young people today are deciding to stay single, check out the video here. And let me know what you thought of this video in the comments down below, and like, share, and subscribe.